about Trade Winds of Change, Green Trends Amidst Geopolitical Conundrum, held by DFD Lab, or the Decarbonization for Development Lab, Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, Indonesia. On this honorable occasion, I, Nadia Daulay, will be the host for this event. Before we move on to the opening remarks, please let me greet our distinguished guest today, Dr. Ma Jun, the founder and president of the Institute of Finance and Sustainability, and also Dr. Yose Rizal Damuri, the executive director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. To get this event going, I would like to invite Pa Yose to the stage for his opening remarks.
Very good afternoon to distinguished participants. It is really an honor, pleasure for me to welcome you to the FD lectures under the theme of Trade Winds of Change, Green Trade Trends Amid Geopolitical Conundrum. This is the lecture. This lecture would be provided by Dr. Dr. Ma Jun on the trade issues. This, I think, very timely and thought-provoking sessions. It would ask us to reflect on the evolving relationship between trade, climate issues, and also geopolitical issues that are currently under critical junctures on our global economy. As we know, trade has long been a powerful engine of economic growth, poverty reductions, and technological diffusions. Yet, as the urgency of climate action intensifies, the environmental footprint of global trade is also increasingly coming under scrutiny. The trade involves production activities, and with these production activities, emissions is produced. Trade also involves logistical activity, moving the products from one country to another country significantly contributes to the greenhouse gas emissions through the use of fossil fuels. Moreover, trade can also drive unsustainable patterns of production and consumptions, exacerbating resource depletion and environmental degradations, especially when the environmental standards are weak and poorly enforced. However, trade can also hold the key to accelerating the green transitions. It can enable the global diffusion of clean technologies, for example, lower the cost of renewable energy infrastructure, and foster innovations through open market and competitions, particularly for developing countries like Indonesia. Participation in green global value chains offer good pathways to sustainable industrializations and economic diversifications. However, this is not something easy to implement, of course, especially given the current context. Today's landscape of global green trade is being reshaped as well by geopolitical tensions, especially involving the strategic competitions between the major powers such as the United States and China. The impositions of high tariff to the import of electric vehicles from China by the US, for example, as well as just recently this morning, I read the news, yesterday news, that the US might impose a very astronomical tariff of 3,000% to the solar panels imported not only from China, but also from Southeast Asia. That kind of things also reflects a growing trend of unilateral and retaliatory measures in green industrial sectors. This, of course, poses another challenge for economies, for countries to adopt more greener global supply chain, greener trade activities. because this kind of policy can raise the cost of clean technologies and stalling the climate action progress. For countries like Indonesia, which is pursuing the ambitious golden visions of 2045 and net zero emissions target, this development presents both risks and opportunities. On the one hand, of course, restrictive green industrial policies by major powers can limit access to affordable technologies and constrain export prospects. On the other hand, they highlight the urgency for Indonesia to develop resilient domestic capabilities, to diversify trade partnership, and also strengthen regional cooperations, particularly in this area, in these regions of Asia Pacific. In this context, I think the lecture from Dr. Majun will be especially valuable. Through this lecture, we will explore how evidence-based policy making, regional collaborations, as well as better governance can help developing economies to chart a just and sustainable course in the green trade area. So we are very honored to have Dr. Majun to deliver the speech today, this afternoon. He's already with us right now. And allow me to introduce Dr. Ma a little bit. Although I think for us, for many of us, Dr. Ma need no further introductions actually, because Dr. Ma also already with us during the morning sessions discussing about green finance. But let me read a little bit the biography of Dr. Ma, because it's quite complete one and very distinctive. Dr. Majun is the founder of and president of Institute of Finance and Sustainability, IFS, and also chairman of several other organizations, several other corporations as well. Dr. Ma also holds very distinctive positions in many international agency and organizations. Dr. Ma, for example, served as co-chair of G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, SFWG, and chairs of 2 work streams of the Central Banks and Supervisor Network for Greening the Financial System. Dr. Ma is a globally renowned policy advocate and effective practitioner for green and sustainable finance, and already received numerous awards for his research and policy advocacy. For example, one of his contribution is that he led the drafting of China's green finance guidelines, and and also China's first green bond taxonomy during the 2015-2016. He initiate and facilitate a range of global consensus on scaling up green finance under the G20 framework. He also initiate several other initiatives, including also by founding the Green Investment Principles for the Belt and Road in 2018, so that currently already becomes a big network of green investment principles in several regions, including also the one here in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia, GIP ASEAN chapter. So, of course, Dr. Ma has very long and distinguished achievement, and we are very fortunate that today we will hear from him about his perspective about the global trade, and also especially on the green trade area. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Majun to come to the stage, and also perhaps straight to also deliver your speech. Please, Dr. Vajit.
Thank you very much. Do I have the PowerPoint that I can manage by myself? Good. Let me try. Great, it's working. Well, thank you, Park Yose, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my great honor and pleasure to be here again. Today, I spoke a lot in the morning's Green Finance session, and as Park Yose said, I actually used to be a macroeconomist in many agencies, including the World Bank, the IMF, the Chinese Central Bank, and last 10 years, I've been working intensively on green finance initiative, but I do sort of keep my economist mindset, and in recent year, I began to sort of refocus on trade-related issues and trying to link trade with green. The current backdrop, I think all of you feel very strongly that the global economy is facing two very important challenges. One is the deglobalization, which is represented by Trump administration's putting up tariff on everybody, especially on China, 145, and now you're saying it's 3,000, right, % tariff. And in fact, it puts up a tariff on everybody, reciprocal tariff. And that's why Ibu Mary is in the US for negotiation, right? And this is a big challenge to the global economy, the sustainability of the supply chain, especially to the free trading system. The second big challenge, which we felt a little bit earlier, is the US leaving the Paris Agreement once again. They did that during the first term of Trump administration, and recently they did it again. In fact, within the green circle, we're feeling lots of these withdrawals from the US, including recently the US was telling the Chinese co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, was saying that we are no longer your co-chair. And it's just informing you that you have to find another partner. Plus the withdrawal from NGFS, which Park Yose just mentioned. I was serving in the NGFS as the head of some work stream, but US came about 4 years ago, and they recently left. So this is another set of shocks to the global community, especially on the climate side. Now we're facing two challenges. Let me summarize. One is on free trade. One is on climate change agenda. And what should we do here in Asia? I think our view, collectively from many discussions involving Indonesian colleagues led by Ibu Mary, back a few months ago, we did that in Hong Kong, is that Asia has its own leadership against these trends, meaning we should do something to uphold the principle of free trade, and we should do something to demonstrate leadership on fighting climate change. And the combination of these two needs is what I call green trade. We need to do green and trade, and these two things actually can come together. In fact, before, these two concepts were separate. In many of the discussions, the green guys, environmental guys, or the green finance guys, they don't talk to the trade guys. And the trade guys, they don't know much about the green, yeah? But we now actually found it's actually a very interesting combination that these two themes can reinforce each other. And we can serve the purpose of both decarbonization and enhancing trade across jurisdictions, and thereby increasing economic benefits, increasing jobs, and decarbonizing our economies faster than otherwise. So that was the idea. In fact, back about 6 months ago, I talked to Ibu Mary during the COP. She was there in the COP29. I said, I've been working on this idea of green trade and potentially pushing into this idea into the RCEP, which is the regional trade bloc, that ASEAN is a big part of it, and China, Japan, Korea, Australia, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand are also part of it. It's a total of about 15 countries. And I think RCEP may be the first platform to actually introduce some of the green trade elements for various reasons why I think it's most appropriate. We'll elaborate later. So today, maybe in the next 20, 25 minutes, I'll elaborate some of ideas on how to incorporate green trade idea into RCEP. Now, the two big issues are, what do we mean by green trade, right? We have to trade green goods and services. We have to define green goods and green services. And the second big issue, what do we do in this green trade policy package? We need to have a few options. For example, we can reduce tariff on green goods and services. We can reduce non-tariff barriers on green goods and services. Therefore, we can achieve certain results. For example, accelerating trade and production of green economic activities, and also enhancing economic welfare and benefits, at the same time helping decarbonization. So these are the topics which I'll cover. So first topic is actually why we need to have a green trade. By green trade, I really mean freer green trade, rather than putting up more barriers against green trade, right? So it's about liberalization of the trade region to allow freer green trade across countries and jurisdictions. Now, one of the reasons is that fighting climate change requires a lot of technologies. We need goods and services, especially green technologies. And I hear specialists telling me that the technology to achieve net zero are half in place, and the other half are not in place yet, because they are still being developed, being experimented. And these technologies cannot be invented in every single nation out of the world. They are actually invented in some countries, and then they're transmitted, made available to other countries to have the global economy to use it. And therefore, trade is very important to allow these green technology to be available in other countries and jurisdictions to deal with climate change and decarbonize the economies. So what we need is that all countries, especially developing economy, they need access to affordable green goods, green services, and green technologies in order to decarbonize. But if you put up a lot of tariffs, for example, the US putting up a 100% tariff on Chinese renewable equipment and electric vehicles and batteries, it will make the importing country feel very expensive in utilizing these technologies, and therefore it will slow down the pace of decarbonization. Right? Just imagine if a country has to use very, very expensive green power. The green power cannot replace the old traditional power very quickly, and it will delay the process, right, on a global scale. So free trade or reducing and eliminating trade barriers is very important in improving efficiency of the transitioning towards a green economy. And RCEP, which is the region I just described, including China, Australia, these are two sort of dark blue countries, and with those light blue in the middle, 15 countries. This is one of the largest trading blocs already formed. It was intended to move towards free trade. At the time of setting this RCEP up, the intention is to cut most of the goods and services tariff to zero, most, maybe 90%, right, within a period of 10 years. So it was already set up, and it represented the 30% of global GDP and 2.3 billion people. And this region is also the home for some of the vulnerable countries, especially the small island countries in ASEAN, to climate change. Just imagine, climate change is leading to sea level increase, and some of the island countries will disappear. And so the benefits of fighting climate change to ASEAN is actually great. And also, a lot of the ASEAN countries are vulnerable to physical climate change, which may lead to less agricultural production and more job losses and poverty. That's why the climate agenda, climate actions are very important for the region, especially for ASEAN. For the reason of finding new solutions, policy solutions, using trade policy to accelerate the climate action, we set up this research group, which is initiated by Institute of Finance and Sustainability that I chair, together with the other two organizations, one under the Peking University, one under the University of International Trade and Business. These are both in Beijing-based organizations. And this team, we now have like 10 plus people, began to work on a CG model, computable general equilibrium model, and try to simulate the green trade policy and its impact on climate and impact on economic benefits for all participating members and country. Our initial results indicated the following conclusions. Number one, green trade policies can accelerate green and low carbon transition across all RCEP countries, meaning we will make the decarbonization faster than otherwise, compared with the situation without green trade policy. And secondly, the green trade policy could benefit every single economy in the trade bloc. It's no longer a zero-sum game, right? Between Trump's tariff and other countries, it's a zero-sum game. I want to get more revenue from you, yeah. And this RCEP green trade policy will benefit everybody in terms of economic growth, GDP, in terms of export expansion, in terms of job creation. And thirdly, this green trade policy designed in a fashion that we propose is not taking any unilateral approach. We need to discuss among all the 15 members, and let's agree on a set of policies, and agree on the set of green goods and services, agree on the agenda for reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers. Then if this is a sort of pathway towards the policy, it will not cause a retaliation, right? It's not a unilateral, it's not zero-sum, and we will not end up with a trade war. So these are three benefits which I think the world desperately needs, this kind of a policy dialogue, rather than unilateral sanctions or tariff increase. Now, coming to the specifics of what do we mean by green goods and services, there are actually three sets of definition, or three possible ways to define green goods and services. One is what I call the narrower definition, which has been used for past decades in some of the bilateral agreements. For example, New Zealand has signed a couple of bilateral agreements with other countries, like with UK, for example. And the UK also signed a couple of bilateral agreements with other countries. And they have been introducing some green trade elements on what they call environmental goods. By environmental goods, it refers to, for example, the waste treatment facility. The facility equipment that can reduce air pollution, water pollution, land contamination is considered an environmental good. Renewable energy, it's obviously one of the items in the environmental goods. It could include some organic agriculture products. Of course, the list can be long, right? 100, 200 items. But overall, these number of goods are representing a small percent of GDP in these old definitions. Yeah. And historically, APAC has also compiled some list of environmental goods. You can see some examples here in the APAC list. For example, one of the environmentally preferred products is called bamboo flooring panels. And the other one, air pollution control, including the filtering and purifying machine. Just like a machine you put into your home, right, to reduce PM 2.5. That kind of stuff is considered as environmental goods. And this is a UK, New Zealand list of environmental goods. They have this on the website under an agreement, and they decided to remove the tariff on trade for these goods. The second definition, which is broader than the environmental goods, we're calling them green/environmental goods and services. So not just the goods, merchandise goods, but we also allow services to enjoy lower tariff and other trade barriers. And these services could include, for example, this morning we talked about green finance. Right? This is a typical part of the financial services that's green. In China, let's say the banking system, 14% of the bank loans are green loans in the Chinese statistics. So we can say 14% of the Chinese banking services are green. Yeah. And also environmental monitoring services. I'm not selling you equipment, but I help you to monitor your PM 2.5, your water pollution, your CO2 emissions, and so on. Oh. Can we? Yeah, maybe I can sort of, just by memory, give you a couple of examples. ESG disclosure services. I think it's now a very big deal, right? I used to tell our youngsters who are looking for jobs, saying that in China, we currently have 10 million accountants. In the future, we need 10 million people who do ESG disclosure, right? Because every company have to disclose not just accounting numbers, financial figures, but also ESG-related information. So that kind of services, ESG disclosure, will become a very important service. And maybe another example of risk analysis. Also, we use that quite extensively in the financial system. We call climate stress testing. We'll tell our clients whether it's a bank or it's an investor or it's a company that you may be facing some kind of a climate risk. And the climate risk could be involving typhoon and tornado or sea level increase and everything. How much of these kind of risks is going to damage your assets? This kind of analysis is a typical service, right? So all these services can be exported, especially some economy, they need a service, but they don't have the local capacity. They will import from other jurisdictions. So can I click now? It's my now, anyway, I can move on because I remember all the stuff there. So I mentioned two definitions. One is environmental goods, which is a smaller. I think just a few percent of GDP. Then we expanded to environmental goods and services, right, which is bigger. And the third definition, which is what I call the broadest definition of the green list, is green goods and services plus low carbon goods and services. For low carbon goods and services, it can essentially cover every goods and services. For example, we can talk about low carbon steel and low carbon cement. These are huge. In Indonesia, I think some analysts were saying that Indonesia's demand for steel and cement is going to exceed that in China. And China used to be 50% of the global demand for steel and cement. And once you have 3 times more babies, you have 3 times more in demand for cement and steel. But cement and steel can be classified into what I call high carbon and low carbon. For example, currently, I think the Chinese carbon intensity for steel is like 1.6 tons of carbon per ton of steel. Right? We can set a threshold there. For example, 0.6 being the threshold. Below that, it's called low carbon steel. Above 0.6, it's called high carbon steel. And cement, the same thing, right? We can engineer the technology so that the cement production will involve less carbon emission. So if each ton of cement has lower carbon emission compared with the threshold, then we call it a low carbon cement. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Now, here are the lists. Low carbon steel and low carbon cement. We can have low carbon iron ore. Why I put it in there? Because I was visiting Australia recently, and they want me to talk about this. So I show them this example. They export a lot, iron ore and aluminum and so on. So it's possible. In fact, some Australian producer was saying they have 0 carbon iron ore already, which can qualify this definition of low carbon iron ore. And low carbon textile. Virtually all kind of manufacturing, you end up with a carbon footprint number for your product, right? Whether it's a piece of textile, or it's a glass, or it's a computer, or it's a microphone. We can know the carbon intensity of the product. And we put a threshold in between, saying below that, it's low carbon products. And also, it could be beef, right, and pork. And for beef, it may not be a low carbon beef. In fact, the cow actually emits a lot of methane. Yeah? And some of the technology is now made available to reduce like 70-80% of methane by giving them the new feedstock right? They eat different kind of feedstock, and the methane emission will be reduced. So it's called low GHG, right, beef that can be produced. And of course, the services can also be classified as low carbon or high carbon. For example, aviation. There are now many airlines begin to use SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, right, which is made of, for example, ethanol. And so if you use enough of sustainable aviation fuel, then the flight become low carbon, right? And the shipping as well. There are a lot of sustainable fuel are being developed. And once you use enough of low carbon fuels, the shipping become a low carbon. So this is a big deal. In fact, the low carbon goods and services can cover a much bigger part of economy compared with the pure environmental goods and services. So taking note that there are 3 definitions here we can work with. Then let's talk about options. So how do we reduce trade barriers against the 3 different types of definition of green goods and services? In this study, by green trade policy, we refer to ways of reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers within a free trade bloc, for example, RCEP, in order to incentivize the production and trading of green and low carbon goods and services. So the objective is very clear. If I cut non-tariff barrier, you as a producer of the green goods, you're incentivized because you make more money by selling to me, right? And you save this part of tariff, and it becomes your profits, and therefore you're incentivized to produce more. Now, here are some numbers on how high the current tariff are within the RCEP. And these are not the latest number. It was picked by publication by 2022. So the very current numbers, I think, are somewhat lower than this. So we have some meat products facing 20% tariff, and some automobile and parts facing 9%, and others, right? Somewhere between 1 to 22%. These are the kind of tariff levels we are talking about. And also, we have non-trade barriers, NTB. There are many, many types of non-trade barriers. When they combined, and we can estimate the ad valorem equivalent, which is how much of the non-trade barriers equivalent to X% of tariff. And the scholars are saying that these NTBs equivalent to 28% on tariff relative to for meat, and maybe 8% for automobiles. These are the current sort of status quo, the starting point that we're working with. For non-tariff barriers, there are so many of these. This is not a complete list. It's just a few examples. For example, some countries impose quota. I don't allow exports or import beyond certain fixed numbers, right? And others say we have licensing requirement. In order to export, you have to get my license. And, or in order to import, you have to get my license. And also a lot of quality inspections, verification requirements. And this is where our standardization interoperability will come in to reduce these barriers. If each country have a different standard for one product, and you need to sell to 15 countries, you have to meet 15 different standards. And if each country says, I verify your products against my standard using my local verifier, then you have to use 15 different verifiers to verify against the 15 different standards. These are very, very big trade barriers. Yeah. And also custom clearing process, and some products may have traceability requirements. I need to know the origin of your components, and become very complicated, right? And of course, trade finance can be a barrier if it's made very difficult, or using the wrong currency, and with a lot of documentation proving that you are trading the right thing, it becomes very costly. And sometimes cross-border payments are very costly and taking a long time, and they charge fees on top of these cross-border payments. All these become non-trade barriers. So what do you do with all of these? I think this study can be done for many, many years because each one is different, and each one requires a different remediation. For example, on quota and licensing, it's relatively easy. You just try to remove it or reduce them, right? And on standards, traceability, verification requirements, quality requirements, these involve hundreds of areas of harmonization and interoperability and mutual recognition, right, of standards, the verification requirements, and the verification agencies, and so on and so forth. And also, we need to adopt digital solutions on data sharing and reporting. If each custom requires you to report on paper, and you have to fill out more form based on my format, it becomes very costly, right? If all these countries in the 15-member RCEP agree on that's using one form to transmit data using one standard and electronically, it can reduce a lot of costs. So these are just examples. Maybe we can also introduce a little bit of green finance here. If we trade the green goods and services, and green finance can be used to provide the credit for that trading, and that credit carries a lower interest rate. That's one potential resolution, right, to the trade finance barrier. And now here is the highlight. We put this matrix on different definitions and different policy choices to implement green trading RCEP and see which one will bring you most of the benefits and which one can generate such big benefits so every country can get a slice of it. Yeah. And now initially we have this very small circle, right, on the this one. It's on the top left side. Why the benefits are measured by the circle is small? Because it's a very small base for benefiting from the green trade policy. We use a narrow definition of green goods. It's environmental goods. Because the number of environmental goods is small relative to the total economy. Even if you cut a tariff, non-tariff barrier to zero, the benefits it brings to the economy is relatively small. And that's why I think in the past few decades, this environmental goods trade didn't really get much attention, even though it was successful bilaterally between two countries, but not many other people are talking about. Of course, one of the reasons that they're only cutting tariffs, because it's only option one, right? And if you have a second option, which is non-tariff barrier reduction, then it will add a benefit, even if we are working on only green goods. So if we have option 1 and 2 both apply to green goods, then the total benefit is somewhat larger, which is the sum of the first and second ball, right? It goes into the third ball in the same line. And then let's look at the second line, which is green goods and services. This is an enlarged definition, right, of green products. And once we apply the reduction in tariff, it generates this benefit. Once we apply non-tariff barrier reduction, it generates second benefit, and when you add them up, it becomes the middle line of the last column. Yeah, it gets bigger. Now, the biggest base for applying these liberalization policy is what we call green and low carbon goods and services. If you adopt both tariff reduction and non-tariff barrier reduction, which goes to the last big ball, the benefit is very, very large. Our initial estimates is that this benefit could be as large as a few $100 billion US. Yeah, I don't want to sort of say the very precise number because the model is still being tested with many different assumptions discussed between our Beijing team and, in fact, our Indonesian team, led by Ibu Mari, and also Australian team. And they're still refining the numbers. But in terms of magnitude, order of magnitude, it's going to be a few $100 billion US. It's large enough for each country in the RCEP to get a positive slice. And now let me give you a couple of examples of the previous green trade agreements that's already being implemented. In fact, there are many of these. In terms of numbers, there's something like 40 agreements. Most of these are bilateral. That's why you see in the last 20 years it's gaining some popularity. And the benefits of these green trade agreement, this is one example. Since the introduction of the environmental goods list under the APEC, the intra-APAC trade in these goods rising by 7% by 2022. But for the global green goods in the same category, without this environmental goods treatment, they grew only by 0.9%. So it's something like a 5 percentage points difference, which has increased the green trade due to the liberalization measure within the APAC. Of course, because the goods are small in terms of size of GDP, the benefit is not so obvious on the global scale. But if we expand to definitions such as low carbon goods and services, I think could be much, much larger. And my final remarks are what should we do, right, in order to push this idea into a practical application like in RCEP. Now, first of all, why RCEP, not the other places? I think the World Trade Organization is not in the right place to discuss any of that kind of liberalization. I think now it's a place to really try to keep it alive, right? And because of being challenged by a lot of U.S. policies on tariff, and it doesn't have the mood in really initiating something like that. And in other places, for example, between Europe and China, we're not facing that kind of mood as well, because Europe just slashed the tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. And China is now actually trying to negotiate a deal with Europe for cutting back the tariff to original level rather than cutting down to zero. So looking at the world, which area, which region is most suitable for that kind of discussion? I think it's Asia. In fact, in March, when my team convened representative of 7 countries, including from mainland China, from Indonesia, from Thailand, from Australia, from Japan, and so on, out of the discussion of 50 people, like in this room, there's zero opposition against the idea coming out of the 7 countries' jurisdictions. So I think it's very encouraging. If this conversation is happening elsewhere, in the US and other more developed regions, I think a very large percentage of the voices will be against the free trade. I think partly because within Asia, our economies are more complementary to each other rather than competing heads-on many of the sectors. And that's why both members or all members in RCEP tend to feel that the free trade is benefiting us economically and also technology-wise. So I think politically, RCEP is closer to the most feasible place for implementing free trade idea. Now, in terms of principles for initiating that kind of conversation, I think there's 3 points here. One is we need a consensus from all parties, right? Every member has the equal right to present their ideas and have their voice. And secondly, in terms of green standards, let's align with international standards. A lot of standards. In the green finance space, I've been involved in initiating a lot of standard development. For example, the China-European-led Common Ground Taxonomy, which is really an agreement between the 2 largest green finance markets on the list of green activities that's now recognized both China and Europe. And we now have 72 activities under the China-European-led Common Ground Taxonomy. So this kind of international standards or benchmarks should be referenced in our discussion RCEP, so we can avoid the perception of you guys doing greenwashing, randomly define your green activities. Third thing that let's make sure the design of the policies are benefiting all members so that they actually agree to sit down and sign on that kind of agreement. Instead of producing in China and selling all from shipping to Indonesia, you should produce more here. So economically, it will work at the corporate level, at the economic principle level. So in the future, I think very naturally, even without so much of policy maneuvering, the supply chain of green manufacturing will gradually move towards ASEAN countries. And that can be facilitated or speeded up by the green FDI policy. And now finally, we have to develop a roadmap on pushing this into the RCEP framework. For example, within 2 years, I think RCEP will begin to review the terms of reference, meaning setting new agenda for the RCEP. And I think we should take advantage of these 2 years and try to convince the relevant negotiator representing the 15 member countries of RCEP for them to bring to the table and formalizing the process. And we, as a think tank people, I think have the responsibility to do a lot of homework before our policymakers and negotiators begin to take these to the table for negotiation. So that's what I want to say for the moment. And thank you very much for your attention, and love to engage some conversation on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for very insightful and also interesting presentations from you, Dr. Majun. I think we all learn a lot from your 30 minutes of presentations on green trade, and also how to deal with green trade policy, as well as on how to put it into more formal agreement or arrangements like the RCEP. It is quite interesting and helpful for us to understand the issue actually when you when you start your presentations with the definitions of green trade from a very specific, very quite narrow the definitions of green trade of the what you call this environment goods, the goods that help, that facilitates green transitions better. And then move to the second definitions by including also services into that. Goods and services that facilitate or promote green transitions. But I think it is quite interesting. You also define green trade into a very broader definitions, and I believe this is more important one, that green trade also need to include trade on various goods that are that can be considered low carbon, perhaps emitting less emissions to the environment, and then perhaps even help the environment itself. So it can cover the entire definitions of goods and services, as you also explained in your presentations. I think that very helpful before you move to the policy side on how to facilitate a trade on environment good, on the environment goods and services, or to the broader definitions of green products, by including also low carbon products, and then how to implement it under the regional arrangements such as RCEP. I think this is very important because as we also already discussed this morning, some kind of regulatory coherence at certain levels might help a lot on making the green finance, as we discussed this morning, as well as green trade, can be implemented more effectively. Yeah. So before I invite the audience to ask questions, I would also like to ask questions related to your presentations, Dr. Ma. You mentioned about the policy that try to encourage trade for green products, either it's a green product in the narrow definitions or green products in the more broader definitions, such as a low carbon product. But in many cases, we've also seen that countries or economies actually take the I can see quite opposite approach on green trade. You mentioned about low carbon products. That means there are also high carbon products. And the thing is, and many trade policies currently under implementations or already in the implementations or under the plan to be implemented tend to give some kind of sanctions to the high carbon products. What I mean is like the policy such as the European Union policy, such as what we call the carbon border adjustment mechanisms. It tries to reduce the trade of high carbon products by giving a higher tariff or additional tax to on trade of these high carbon products. On the one hand, it might discourage trade on this high carbon product, so that countries or economies would start to shift toward low carbon productions. But on the other hand, it can also be regarded as a disguised protectionism, because it might also give some advantage for more advanced countries that can develop their own low carbon industry, for example, and reduce the competitiveness of many developing countries' product, especially those who cannot really produce those low carbon products. And cannot really comply to the regulations and the standards that they require. What do you see this kind of development? We have seen the move from the European Unions of the carbon border adjustment mechanisms, or some other economies also start to look at the possibility of having similar restrictions for high carbon product. So how do you see it? Just want to look at it from a different angle, actually. Instead of low carbon, we're looking at high carbon products.
Yeah, I very much with you. In fact, one of the origin of this free trade study was a reflection on the EU CBAM. In fact, my team been working on the impact of the European CBAM for the last few years, and we did a CGE model that shows that the CBAM, although it may be well-intended, according to what they say, it's intended to reduce carbon leakage and try to speed up decarbonization elsewhere, but it causes resentment from other countries, especially developing country, low-income country, exporting carbon-intensive goods to Europe. And we show that the economic impact of CBAM on many developing countries are negative. The GDP goes down, the exports goes down, the job goes down, the fiscal revenue goes down. So I would call the EU CBAM as a stick with the intention of encouraging decarbonization elsewhere. And I call my green trade policy as a carrot. We induce other countries to do decarbonization. They will do it happily with a carrot, right? And one thing is the same, the intention is the same. CBAM wants to decarbonize, and green trade wants to decarbonize. But economic consequences are different. CBAM is a zero sum. I take your money, and you lose. And the green trade policy is win-win. You get something, I get something. And the third aspect, which is different, is CBAM is unilateral. I decide, and you have to follow. And the green trade policy is multilateral. Everybody agrees. Therefore, we're not going to cause the problem like retaliation in our green trade policy discussion, but CBAM possibly will trigger retaliation on what other countries believe as a trade protectionist measures.
Yeah, that's actually a common perceptions among developing countries, that those policy actually is a protectionism in disguise, and then not really giving a good incentive, a good promotions of decarbonizations. So yeah, this is one the message that we also I think so we also need to amplify in order for those especially those in the developed countries, the policymakers there also take the perspective of having more mutual benefit instead of having a zero-sum strategy. Now I'd like to move to the current situations of the U.S. withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, as well as perhaps not instead of supporting the greater green trade as well as decarbonizations for industries and production activities. Right now, even the U.S. try to promote the reversals to the fossil fuel. The use of fossil fuels and try to limit the trade on environmental products. How do you see this kind of move? Is it going to be a precedent for other countries? Is it going to undermine the efforts, the initiative that have been carried out, especially on the decarbonizations of industries and other production activities? So what do you see about it? Because, like for example, here in Indonesia, we've seen some officials already said something in a spirit like, oh, well, the U.S. also withdraw from the Paris agreements. So why not? Why do we have to follow the green transitions and also especially on the energy consumptions as well as on the decarbonization of industry?
I think some people may say that, but the majority of the world leaders, I think they're clear-minded and they will understand that the decarbonization itself, in fact, creates opportunities for the country's economy. And indeed, if you see the major green sectors, they're all growing much faster than the traditional sector. There's no way that the fossil fuel industry is going to grow as fast as the renewables, right? And within renewables, there's so many opportunities. Early days, we have solar, wind. Now we have biomass, and we have sustainable aviation fuel, and we have many other options. In the vehicle sectors, we have electric vehicles. We now have a lot of batteries, and electric vehicles has thousands of components. So all these things are growing at many times of the old economy. If you're not engaged, you're losing out, right, in terms of economic opportunity. And so I think for truly global leaders, they will definitely understand that being part of the global trend of fighting climate change is going to create more jobs, create more economic benefits, create more strengths in terms of R&D capabilities. Of course, some may misunderstood this trend and they lose out in the period. I think in 3-4 years' time, the Americans will really regret that they missed the originally very strong trend of doing renewables, doing electric vehicles, and doing batteries. And 4 years later, there's no more chance for them because the world is going to be really taken up by other leaders globally.
So this is also give us a lot of opportunity for getting and get the benefit from the situation, I believe. But that applies to those who has capacity. And the capacity and resources of many countries are quite different. Especially when we're talking about developing countries like Indonesia, for example, or other Southeast Asian countries. There are many of us do not really have the resources in order to have these transitions, or also and also to support the decarbonizations of our industry. How do you see the capacity building? Perhaps it can also be carried out under the green trade policy that you propose in your presentations.
Yeah, I think most of the countries have a role to play in this massive growth of green economy. For example, the auto industry, it has a few thousand components. It doesn't have to be concentrated in one country. It can be located in 50 different countries, right? And out of the 3,000 components, 1,000 could be in ASEAN countries, and the rest would be in China, Japan, and Korea. I think this relocation of the supply chain become a key for ASEAN countries to gain during the process of green industrialization. And we need a regional block. It's trade plus investment plus technology block to fairly distribute the economic activities in the RCEP region. That's why this green trade block is important. It needs to really induce the countries to relocate the appropriate production into where they should be. Right? For example, Indonesia with maybe the right location close to the market, with the right labor force, and with the right pricing strategies. I think if this arrangement is done on a mutually respected basis, I think Indonesia and many ASEAN countries will benefit significantly from the green economy growth.
So the keywords is cooperations and supply chains, perhaps global or regional supply chains, and how the countries, economies can fit in to the regional or global supply chains based on their comparative advantage. I think that's a really a good idea on to how to explore. But the question is how to carry it out in agreements like RCEP. Because, like for example, here in Southeast Asia, we have seen that each country in Southeast Asia has aspirations to build their own electric vehicle industry, for example. Instead of working together, having cooperations to have these regional supply chains, each country start to have their own industry and try to build their own industry based on their capacity. Sometimes even giving some restrictions to their market or to the access of technology or natural resources needed for the developments of the industry, the green industry.
Now, let me give you an example of how China became leader in some of areas like the high-speed railway, right? And 5G, 6G telecommunication facilities, because China has a much bigger market than anybody else. In those Western countries originally invented these technologies, they did not find it growing that much in their country because China is so big. And over time, many of the R&D capacity, they moved from OECD country to China to help expanding efficiently in the Chinese market. Then become, really China-led technology. And in the future, Indonesia will lead in market size compared with China. For example, your building, the number of buildings you build per year probably will be bigger than China. And the number of, green cement factory will probably be more than in China because you need to build, low carbon buildings, right? And China has too many buildings already built. We probably need to renovate the buildings rather than building new buildings. So in some areas, you actually become a bigger market. And with a bigger market, you can attract R&D capability. You can ask the Chinese to, hey, you invest an R&D center in my country, right? And then we'll invent stuff with your local people in Indonesia. I think over time, 10, 20 years later, Indonesia will be leading in some of technologies which are serving a much larger, demand market here than elsewhere.
Yeah. So that means there is a role of cooperations between China and Indonesia, for example, or China and other Southeast Asian countries. Do you think that the RCEP can facilitate this kind of more greater cooperations between those countries, those economies, and how to pursue that kind of cooperation?
I think China and Indonesia will play a key role in forming the strategy on green trade within RCEP, because China being the largest supplier, right, of many goods and technologies and so on, Indonesia being probably the largest recipient for now. And the other countries have similarities to China. For example, technology-wise, I think Japan and Korea are pretty similar in providing the same level of technology. And other ASEAN countries with smaller size, but a similar economic structure, they want to sell the same thing to China: agriculture goods, palm oil, and so on and so forth. So if China and Indonesia agreed on something and put it out as an initial proposal, very likely to receive support from other members of RCEP. That's my perception, yeah. That's why I think some sort of leadership in driving this negotiation between China and Indonesia is important. And other countries or jurisdictions like Singapore, and in fact, Hong Kong special region wants to join as well as a member. They are more service-oriented, right? And they can come play some role in providing or facilitating the service trade on the green side for us. But they love to see the real economy, the merchandise green transaction to expand, so the service can be added on top of that, yeah.
So agreements such as RCEP can facilitate that kind of initiative and cooperations. Okay, I don't want to dominate our conversations this afternoon, so I would like to invite the participants here, perhaps to, if you have questions or comments, please to Dr. Majun. So please, Dr. Ma is here to answer and to respond to your questions. Introduce yourself first.
Okay. My name is Shafak Aftari from Blue Path Labs. My question will be around what is your overview, your thoughts about there are so many special economic zones which intra-regional economic zones such as Johor, Singapore, SEZ, and what is your thoughts or plans or strategy to integrate the green trade policy into those intra-regional economic zones? And is there any, what will be the risks, what will be the opportunities? Thank you.
I think the short-term risk is that some of the countries are too busy. They are preoccupied with negotiating with the U.S., so they may not have enough, resource attention to this issue, which is slightly longer term. But that's okay. I think the study itself takes a lot of time to really define the green goods and services clearly, and define the policy pathways clearly, and demonstrating economic benefits clearly. It will take some time. But at the same time, I think we need to gradually inform our policymakers that these ideas are forthcoming and may be raised in some of RCEP, initially what I call peripheral, like working group meetings, and then go into the center. The second issue is that we need to have a few member countries in RCEP who are willingly taking the leadership. This is very important because any negotiation is not simultaneously proposed by all members. It's always a couple of members. They will propose something, and they will think through the process and difficulties and the Q&As, and to explain to the rest of the membership. And that leadership is the public goods. These few countries will have to be willing to spend the time and money and resources to study these issues on behalf of other members. So these are the two short-term issues I'm thinking about that we need to have progress on.
Other questions and comments? Okay, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm Ayuba Jobade again from UIII. So with regards to the goods and services, I would assume that the carbon trading is a part of this. And then in the morning, the other gentleman did made mention that one of the challenges that carbon market is facing right now is the pricing issue. So this new policy that you've made mention here, do you think it has the potential to change the dynamics of that, to make Indonesian carbon market more viable so that it can be able to attract more international participants to take part in it, so that the whole potential that it has can be reaped, can be like realized? And if there is a possibility, how is this going to happen?
Yeah,
through
no,
this?
very interesting idea. In fact, I mentioned green finance being one of the items that we should facilitate by reducing trade barriers across jurisdiction. And the carbon trading is part of the green finance, right? According to my definition, the green finance can involve, for example, selling green bonds across border. For example, Indonesian can issue green bonds in China, and China can issue green bonds in Singapore, right? That's a cross-border money transaction with green labels. And at the same time, we can trade the carbon credits. If the Indonesian forestry project can generate carbon credit, which is recognized by China, then China will buy your carbon credit, and vice versa. So I think we definitely need to include these services into the consideration of RCEP, Green Trade Package. But each of them is very complicated. Just on the voluntary carbon market trading, I actually see this morning the report has a table of roughly like 10 countries have voluntary carbon markets already, or at least some plan. So we need to harmonize them in terms of standards. And we need to actually mutually recognize the verifiers against each other. And we need to actually have the cross-border trading rules clarified, making sure the regulator don't stop them, don't tax them, and don't declare they are illegal.
Okay, next. Okay, thank you. Can I get a question? Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Etrida Pulungan. I'm policy analyst for international relations in the Secretary General, House of Regional Representative of Republic of Indonesia. So from 2021, we're trying to focus on push for the climate change law. Actually, this is the lower house. We have upper house, DPR, but it's more general to ratification of international. But this is the our national interest, because in our member of parliaments consists of 38 provinces, with one province delegate for member parliaments, and they are going to the some region and province in Indonesia. So going to the sum of the law, we need to know more inputs, especially about the tariffs, bond and everything, and also some of the policy design of this coming law. So my question is, for your own perspective and also very experience since G20 until now, did we have some of guidance, especially for Indonesia, to get some of the regulations and bonds that you guiding by your research on everything? If it yes, we will invite you to the parliaments because we need more input in the perspective of Indonesia, and also could be regulated and will be going to the province, and all provinces have a different characters. So it was first one, and the second, according to your predictions of this coming, many of ASEAN countries look like have some of the, what you call, trying to save themselves. Even they are in the ASEAN umbrella, but they're trying to save themselves. And some of countries, I'm so sorry to say, some of the world leader or maybe some of the presidents sometimes go to this place, not go to another place. They look like just selected just one country. For example, they're going to Singapore, they're going to some places, but they don't go, they skip Indonesia, for example, yeah. And it means for us, is it ASEAN is good enough for this coming year still have a very strong as a regional corporations? Because in this arena, like what we see in the titles, look like everybody want to find a good formula to save their own, and especially for the what we call the green finance. So what is your suggestion for the ASEAN country, especially Indonesia? Thank you very much.
Now let me try to understand your question. Are you talking about the green finance, or it's your trade negotiation with the U.S., or both? Yeah, yeah. Now green finance is relatively easy. It's less political. So far, I think a lot of international agreements, platforms, they work on a voluntary basis, and whoever wants to join, you are admitted. I personally was involved in setting up and chairing, co-chairing a lot of the international platform of green finance. It's all very friendly. Yeah. For example, in 2017, I was involved in setting up this NGFS, the Central Banks and Supervisors Network for greening the financial system. At that time, the U.S. didn't join because the U.S. left the Paris Agreement at that time. But 8 central banks, including the People's Bank of China, which I represented, we set it up. Then we invited all other central banks to join, and most of them joined. Within 4 years, it became 100-something central banks. And the U.S. came and go, right? 4 years ago, they joined, and a few months ago, they left. That's okay. I call this coalition of willing. And whoever is willing, and let's do it together. In the future, I think there will be lots of a coalition of willing on various subjects. And on trade negotiation, I think ASEAN should be united, right, in negotiating with the U.S. Because the U.S. is so big in terms of size relative to each of the ASEAN countries. When a country is 100 times bigger than you, and you don't have bargaining power, and you have to really be yielding to a lot of their pressures. But if you go there and say, we belong to part of a trading bloc, we have to talk to our members to discuss a consensus view before I can come back to you. You are much, much stronger. Right? You don't have to reply to him tomorrow. You say, we will spend 3 weeks and discuss the issue within the trade bloc and get back to you. I think the U.S., within 3 weeks, will come back and see, probably we don't need to negotiate anymore, and I'll give it up.
Okay. Yes, I think if I may, I would also like to add a little bit the regions, these regions, ASEAN, as well as especially under ASEAN, need to work together. Perhaps it is still reasonable for each Asian country to go to the U.S. by themselves and try to have the negotiations bilaterally at the moment. But in the medium terms or the longer terms, we cannot do it like that. We cannot just let the bully actually try to bully us all the times, and then we have to do it together. We have to get some regional response to that, and then of course it also related to the our today's discussions on the green finance and green trade, and because these kind of things require cooperations at the regional level or at the global level as well. Yeah. Is there any other questions? I think this is quite very interesting and timely discussions. Yeah. So perhaps if you have something to say, you need to ask things on the related to the green trade as well as perhaps green finance as well, that like we discussed this morning. Please do so. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for the very interesting presentation, Dr. Ma. Just want to share. My name is Dandi. I'm from CSIS, Indonesia. So I'm just gonna share some of our work under the Decarbonization for Development Lab, which also doing some the CGE modeling. We're also trying to calculate the impact of CBAM, for example, and really looking forward if we can exchange further with your study group. And that's the first one. The second one, I think one of my comments on your lecture is what's your view about the next year APEC, because it's gonna be China for the chairman, if I'm not mistaken. So I think in addition to the RCEP that you already elaborate quite eloquently, RCEP is good, but I think in terms of APEC, we still have to expand. For example, the environmental list that we have right now. And I'm just really curious whether is there any plan from the Chinese government to do something, the green trade deal, for example, for APEC or something like that. Thank you so much.
Now, on your first point, yeah, we love to collaborate on the CG modeling. Currently, my Beijing team has been working on the CG modeling to simulate this idea, which is the green trade. And we recently got Australian National University people. They also have a set of a CG model. They may actually do something similar. Then we can compare notes. So if you can work on the same issue, and we can send you a lot of data and our assumptions, and you can simulate on your model and see if we come up with similar results, right? I think comparing notes are very important from different countries' scholars, which will support their policymakers respectively. That's point one. On APEC, I'm not sure if major countries have the mood really to focus on green trade for the moment, right? Given the U.S. is putting up tariff and negotiating on a daily basis, back and forth on their positioning regarding international trade, I think really very few people will have the mindset of sitting down and carefully discussing all these longer-term structural issues. I think it's not the right place for now. Especially, I think at least from us in the Asian regions, we are waiting for the U.S. really to calm down, yeah, and normalize their position before we can talk about something more serious.
Also not in the APEC, because the question then these questions is on APEC program or agenda. Next year APEC agenda, you don't see there would be the trade deal or trade at least expansions of environmental goods would be.
Now what I'm hearing more is on this side of the APEC, right? We're talking about green, and the other side of APEC, I have not heard much. Yeah.
All right. Okay then. Any other questions? If not, since we start earlier, it's very rare actually. We start earlier and then finish earlier. Normally we in Indonesia here in Jakarta and in other cities, we normally start a little bit late. Perhaps around 15 minutes, 30 minutes late. But this is an exception. So we always have, especially here at CSIS, we always try to start our event, our forum on time. But even today, we start a little bit earlier, like 15 minutes earlier from the schedules. But I think it's quite good. We have good discussions. We also have a very good presentations from Dr. Ma, lecture from Dr. Ma. To be honest, I learned a lot from your presentations, especially in trying to look at the issue more clearly and then how to use the regional agreements such as RCEP in order to promote trade policy that has the mutual that brings mutual benefit and do not really based on zero-sum strategy as we are witnessing today. So I really I'd like to extend our deepest appreciations on behalf of CSIS and also the FD Lab, as well as from the participants to you, Dr. Ma, and to your very timely as well as very thought-provoking, if I may say, presentations and lectures. I'd like also to invite you all to give appreciations to Dr. Ma. I don't want to go summarize the lecture because I think there are a lot of things that we learned so far this afternoon, and then hopefully it would also provide more greater understanding to all of us here in looking at the issue of green trade and also how to make the green trade policy becoming more effectively implemented in the future. Thank you very much again. Thank you very much, and thank you all to the participations. Really appreciate it. On behalf of CSIS, I'd like also to invite you to all other CSIS events in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Majun and also Pak Yose for hosting this event. I invite you to, you may come down the stage. Once again, thank you for all participants for being here at our event, DFD Lab Lecture with discussion session on Trade Winds of Change, Green Trends Amidst Geopolitical Conundrum held by CSIS Indonesia. See you next time, and thank you once again.